We see, the polls are showing that there's a great deal of distrust in the government. People are just not trusting the government, and you're very affiliated. You've affiliated yourself more with grassroots organizations, tea parties. And they seem to be leading the "we don't trust the government" charge. On the other side of that aisle, a lot of people consider them to be extreme and fearful and maybe a little nutty. What do you say to that?
I say that these people are angry and they've had enough. They're issue specific, they're very organized, and they are very educated people.
Issue specific. Of course, healthcare, we know that that's a big piece of it.
Taxes, healthcare, the economy, freedom of choice, liberty. That's what it's about. And therefore, the Constitution of the United States. How can you argue with that?
It's funny because I go back to that myself all the time. I keep saying I don't understand why you guys think you're smarter than our founding fathers. It's a big issue for me. But one of those issues, the census, the upcoming census, has people screaming and very confused and fearful, at least in what I've seen. What's your take on this upcoming census, and how's it going to play out?
It's very, very important that we get conservative representatives elected to DC now. I believe the president's involvement with this census is going to result in gerrymandered districts. I think it's going to get harder and harder for conservatives to become elected. I do think there is a progressive policy coming from the White House. I think it's been gradually coming from progressive Democrats all along. And I think that if we don't stand up now, we're going to be in a very desperate situation.
Would you advise people? I mean, we're hearing, I see internet posts and people saying, if somebody comes to my door, if a census taker comes to my door, they're going to have a problem. What do you encourage your congressional District 6 constituents? I get my census form, what should I do? What do I do with it?
Well, obviously you need to fill it out. You need to cooperate with the census. It's important to know the populations in every community. This is a basis for grant money. If there's any available, coming back to your municipality, that money's already spent. It's going to be spent somewhere. You ought to be working very hard with that census worker to see that enough of that money comes back home to your hometown to offset the taxes that you'll be charged. That being said, the census needs to be run properly. Undocumented individuals should be documented as undocumented individuals. I do not believe the census should be used for deportation and removal. I do believe that the Immigration, Customs and Enforcement Department under Department of Homeland Security needs to be doing their job and getting those people where they belong, okay? But I do think that there needs to be a census of U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents.
You brought up the Department of Homeland Security, and certainly being from Highlands and being from this area so close to New York post 9/11. National security issues they seem to be falling by the wayside with all of these economic issues being in the forefront.
Oh, yes.
Where has Pallone done anything? What's Pallone's stance versus your stance? Is there a difference?
Well, I will tell you that I am extremely strong in national defense. I believe that we are waging a war on terror. I believe that we cannot shrink away from that war on terror. I sympathize with the families of those military personnel fighting in this war. I believe we should trust the judgment of the military personnel on the ground fighting this war as to when and how to pull back our troops. I believe that we must finish the job that we have begun. I believe that our lack of involvement in the areas where we have received these attacks, from which we've received these attacks, has resulted in the very situation in which we are engaged right now. I believe that military strikes need to be surgical, strategic, they need to be quick, and that reconstruction efforts need to support the inhabitants, the residents, the democratic voters in the new country, the new democratic country that is established. I believe that it is perfectly appropriate for us to support revolutionary action by the grassroots in any country. where there are human rights abuses, but it is even more appropriate when the situation in that country has resulted in attack upon U.S. citizens and an attack on U.S. soil. I do believe that 9/11/01 was an act of war. It was an attack not only on the United States but on our democratic way of life. And I believe that it cannot be tolerated and that we need to finish the job that we've started.
Going to go to the real basic, I mean, we've talked about some issues, we've talked about some campaign issues, and I'm going to go back sort of to the beginning here. Mayor Halfacre's been running, feels like forever. He's been running in 12. You came into this race very late, comparatively speaking. Why did you come in when you did, and why did you come in at all?
Well, I've been looking at Washington, D.C. since college as a goal in mind. Wasn't sure in what capacity I'd be heading there, but I knew it would be at some point. In the last few years, I've been seriously considering a run for Congress. Funding's important. I know that we have pay-to-play issues that we struggle with in the Republican Party at all levels. I knew that I could run for Congress effectively, that I would be a good representative for Congressional District 6, if not the best. I needed to make sure I could fund my race. Early this year, I was contacted by a number of grassroots organizations. They used the example of Scott Brown's race. They indicated that they came in late in that race. They would be involved much earlier in this race. I'm grassroots fundraising right now. We have a model that will work. And if I can fund this race, I can win this race.
Well, the if is the big question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the big question. We know that Diane Gooch can fund this race. If you can fund this race, what have you raised? How much can you raise? What are your projections? And what are they based on?
We have a good start right now. I can raise $1 million before the primary. I would like to raise $1 million before the general. We won't need all of that, in my opinion. I think half is good enough, the $1 million. But we'll spend what we have to spend. We will need to keep you updated as to what goes into the account when. I am really excited. I've been contacted by nationwide groups. I've been told that I will receive in-kind support from those groups, similar to what Governor Christie received. I believe that this primary race will follow that model in many respects. I believe there are nationwide Tea Party conservative groups, pro-life groups that are willing to involve themselves in all congressional races across the nation this election cycle. So I feel confident I can do this, or I wouldn't have bothered.
So you don't have an answer as to how much you've raised to date? There's no...
We have donations coming in via the website. We have checks that have been collected in bundles that are going into the account, and I don't have a number right now for you.
Okay.